Alright, so this is lesson 2 in your digital textbook, and it is a basic retouch lesson. So the first thing we're going to do is duplicate the background layer, since we always try to preserve our original. So you can see the background layers here, and Command J duplicates your background layer, gives you layer 1, and we're going to turn off that background layer by clicking on the eye. So we're going to work on this layer here, this new layer. So I'd like to save as using the naming convention I provided, and be sure it is a Photoshop document or PSD file. So we're going to go to File, Save As, and it's already been saved as my last name Prue, first initial A, underscore, project number, whatever number I assign, and I'm saving it to the desktop. You can save it wherever you like, and make sure your format is Photoshop or PSD. So I'm going to save. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do to this image is straighten it as well as crop it and ensure that it is the size we want it to be, which is 7 inches by 7 inches by 200 ppi. So let's see what size that is now. The key command for that is Option Command I. Brings up this dialog box and tells us that this particular image is 9 inches by 9 inches by 240 ppi, which is not what we want. So we're going to click on OK to exit. So the first thing we're going to do is go to our crop tool, and up here in the options bar, the default on most of your option bars will be ratio, but we want to change that to width by height by resolution. Escape that. And we want 7 inches by 7 inches by 200 pixels per inch. So that's what we want for our final. So now we want that crop tool actually. So now we're going to click on straighten here. Brings up that new little icon. And you want to click on one corner, hold the mouse, and click on the next corner. It'll tell the computer we want this line to be horizontal and we want it to be straight. So just click inside this corner here, drag to this corner, release, and it straightens your photo. So now we want to crop out all this white space. So we're just going to pull in these side handles here. And notice it's maintaining those even proportions for that 7 inches by 7 inches. That looks pretty good as far as I can tell. We're going to save this by pressing return. Oops, and there's still a bit of white there, so I'm going to click on that again. Pull this in a little bit more. Return, and I still see some white on this side. Put that in again. And return. That looks pretty clean now. You can always zoom in on your image using the key command, Command plus, to make sure that you got all those white edges out of there. So Command minus brings it back, reduces the size. Now we're going to check the size. We just adjusted our size. Option Command I to check our image size, and now it's what we want it to be, 7 inches by 7 inches by 200 pixels per inch. So we're going to say OK. So now we have it at the size we want it to be. And we've already saved this as a PSD file with our naming convention, so we're just going to Command S to save the changes that we've made so far. You should be Command S-ing all along. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is correct the color of this image. You can see it has a green cast that doesn't look very nice, so we're going to do this with an adjustment layer. So click here on the tab where it says Adjustments up here. If you don't see that palette, you can go up to Window and find Adjustments here. Just make sure it's checked. It's already checked, so we can keep that. And here's our adjustment palette. And if you hover over each of these icons, it tells you what they are. We're going to be using curves, and please notice in the layers palette that when we click on curves, it's going to add an adjustment layer on top of this layer here that's already selected. So we're going to click on curves. So there's your new curves layer, and it also opens your properties palette here. So the bottom eyedropper here is your white point. If you hover over that, it says sample an image to set white point. So we're going to click on that. And you're not going to click on an area that's already pure white. So this looks pretty pure white because that's not going to brighten up your image very much. So I'm going to pick this area right here, and you can see how that just brightens up your image. So now that we've adjusted white point using curves, we're going to adjust midtones and black point using levels. And that's right next to your curves in the adjustment palette. So here's your curves icon, and here's your levels icon. Again, watch the layers palette. A new levels adjustment layer will come up. And this is your black point handle here. Adjust your black point, and this is your midtones. So we want to be very specific on our numbers on our black point. So we want this to be 15. This is what the book is calling for. And we want our midtones to be 0.9. Okay, so then now that's adjusted our image, but maybe we didn't see it right away. So if you turn off your levels, you can see how it changed the image. So you can see it adds a little bit of contrast there with that levels adjustment layer. Alright, so next we're going to flatten this image to make it easier to work with. When you flatten an image, it takes all these layers here in the layers palette and it makes it into one layer. Just keeps things clean and simple. So we're not going to flatten all the layers, because if we do that, it'll include the original background image that we don't want to lose, right? We want to preserve that. So we're going to select the top layers already selected. If you hold the Shift key and select this bottom layer above the background layer, it will select any layers that are in between there. And then we're going to go up to this menu here, and we're going to go to Merge Layers, and that flattens all those layers into one layer. So you can turn it off. You can, whoops, let's turn that background layer back on, and you can see the changes you've made so far. So turn that back off. Now we're going to repair this crease in the photograph here. And we're going to use our spot healing brush, which is right here. Right below it is the healing brush tool. These are two different tools. Don't get them confused. Healing requires you sample the area you're going to work with. Spot healing does not. So we're going to use the spot healing brush. And we want to adjust the size of our brushes. So up here is where we see our brushes. And we want 100% hardness on this. And we want the size to be 25 pixels, which I've already adjusted, I guess, right there. You can use the slide bar on that, or you can just come in here. It's easier to just highlight it, 25, press return to maintain that selection. And again, or I guess I haven't mentioned this, but you can use your brackets. The right bracket makes your brush bigger, left bracket makes it smaller, but this is a pretty good size right here for the spot healing brush tool. Now we want to be sure that content aware is selected in the options bar under type, and it is. Here's content aware has been selected. And so now we're going to drag down the crease. When you first drag, it's going to look black, but when you let go, it's going to automatically heal. So I'm going to enlarge this image a little bit, Command plus to enlarge, and I'm going to drag down. See, it's black. I'm just going to do a little bit at a time. Release, and it's healed. So now if you use your, zoom in a little bit more, space bar, this little hand comes up, you can move your image around. I'm going to use this spot heal brush again here. Release, space bar, move. Be really careful, try to cover the whole thing, release. And release. Okay, so now Command minus, get our image back. It's looking pretty good, it's looking better. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is get rid of this guy. He's not in our family, and we want to get rid of him. So let's enlarge him a little bit. Command plus. Click on the space bar, drag him over so we can see him a little bit better. So now we want to use the patch tool, which is right underneath the spot healing tool. If you hold down this icon here, you'll see you have your spot healing tool, healing brush tool, and patch tool. So we're going to use the patch tool to select him and take him out. So now you want to make sure you have content aware selected up here under patch and that you've checked sample all layers before you get started. Okay, so I hold down the option key when I outline, so if my hand gets uncomfortable or tired, I can rest it and come right back to where I was. If you don't hold the option key and mess up, you're starting over. So try and get as close as possible. So now I'm going to come in here, click with the mouse, and just select him as closely as possible. There you go. So now he's selected. So now I'm going to drag the selection to the left, and it should replace him with the area next to him. And I'm going to try to keep the cracks in the wall aligned. If you go too far to the left, you're going to start showing the girl, and there's not a lot of room there. So now I'm going to click with my mouse on him and just start pulling him to the left. And you can see if you go too high or too low, that wall's going to get out of line. So you want to try to keep that lined up. You go too far, you're going to get her in there. So let's try to keep it lined up, wall lined up. Keep double checking that wall. That looks pretty good. I don't see him anymore. So release. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so now we want to get rid of these little marching ants from the selection. So Command D to deselect, and he's gone. But you can see that there's still some weird repetitive stuff happening here. Up here it looks a little strange, so it's clear that this has been photoshopped. That's a dead giveaway when you see repetitive images like this. Now we're going to use the clone stamp tool to correct some of these minor irregularities. The first thing you do is fix this wall where it's uneven, and we're going to do that using that clone stamp tool here, which looks like a rubber stamp. So I'm going to click on that. Now, different from the spot healing tool that we use, this tool requires that you sample where you would like to copy, and you do that by holding down the option key and clicking on what you'd like to sample. So let's make this brush a little bit bigger. I'm going to show you clearly how this works. And I'm going to hold down the option key to find my selection. I'm just going to click on her dress, left click, bring the mouse over here, and start adding her dress. So you can see you sample holding down the option key. You're going to sample, and then you're going to bring it over here. We don't want that, so we're going to Command Z that. Oh, and before you start cloning, you need to check your brush. So this is fairly soft focus in here. So I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to bring my hardness down to 0 on that brush. And I'm going to select maybe 25 for the size. And that looks pretty good, so I'm going to press return. Again, you can adjust your size of your brush with your bracket keys if it's not the size you want. And I'm going to select next to this. Now I want to get rid of this little thing that's repeating, right? So I'm going to select right next to it. Closer you select near something, the more true it's going to look. If you get too far over, like this is very red, it's going to look different. These look very repetitive, so I'm going to try to get rid. I'm going to select here, right next to it. Hold down the option key, select, and come right here and get rid of that. This looks kind of weird. It dropped down here, so I'm going to select this and raise it up a little bit. And this look similar, so I'm just going to select here and make it look a little different. This dropped down. Let's bring this back up. And I'm probably going to get another crack here, so You can't go too far, it's going to look strange. So let's grab bits and pieces of this. Grab that, and maybe that. That's going to be too repetitive. Let's try this. It's not too bad. And alright, that's feeling pretty good. I'm going to raise this up a little bit further here. Alright, so now let's address this area up here. So I'm going to select this, start bringing this over a little further. Oh, maybe it's too high. So now I'm going to make my brush a little smaller so that we don't disrupt that wall too much. Left bracket for that. And this looks a little funky here, so right bracket, enlarge my brush. Option, select here. Try to keep this lined up here. And put that in there and see what happens. This feels a little repetitive, so let's see what we can do about that. Let me bring this over a bit. No, Command Z, line it up a little bit better. There we go. And this feels a little odd, so let's extend this over a bit. Maybe add one more of these over here. There, that's starting to look a little bit more normal. We'll take some of this and put it down here. Yeah. Alright, so Command minus. See what we have. Okay, now there's lots of stuff in the sky, a lot of trash in the sky. So, let me zoom back in on that. And still using that soft brush, I'm going to enlarge it a little bit with that right bracket key option. Selecting near these things makes it work the best. And then we have this over here. Let's get rid of that. So it's looking pretty clean, right? Alright, Command minus. Ooh, I'm also noticing this bridge go a little bit messed up right there. So let's use a little bit smaller tool. It's going to be a little trickier. Option. So I'm going to bring this up a little higher. Bring this down a little bit. Zoom in a little bit more on that. And maybe my brush is too soft, so let's change our hardness on that, increase it just a little bit. Let's go to 30, see what that does. Return. Smaller brush still. Tough because we have to duplicate that curve somehow. Nope. Let's bring this over a little bit. There, that looks pretty good. Alright. Alright, bridge is fixed well enough so that it's not distracting. Alright, that looks pretty good. So now we're going to sharpen the image. So please read the book too on this. Don't use the video as a crutch too much. Just use them as an aid, and be sure to read the book. The book says there are several ways to sharpen the image, but the Smart Sharpen filter gives you the most control because sharpening can emphasize artifacts, and you'll want to remove those first. So let's remove the artifacts, or all the dust and scratches. So let's zoom in on his shirt. Take a look at that. So now we're going to go to Filter, Noise, Dust and Scratches to get rid of all that. And you can look around in here. You can zoom in if you want. You want to see what's going on. Keep the radius at 1, threshold at 0. Click OK. So now you can go, let's look at what happened. It's hard to see right away. So let's click off levels. Look at all that dust. And that cleared all that out. Pretty cool. Alright, Command minus. You cleaned up the artifacts, or all the dust and scratches. So now we're going to go to Filter, Sharpen, Smart Sharpen, to sharpen the edges a little bit. And you can also see what's going on here. We're going to put our amount at 60. You can also use this little slider here if you want, but it's easier to just select it and type in what you want there. So we want 60, we want the radius at 1.5, and we've already reduced the noise or dust and scratches, so we're going to click, oh, and make sure you remove lens blur. The book talks a little bit more about that. Click OK. So now we've sharpened up the image a little bit as well. That will conclude the basic retouch assignment, and now we're going to save it, Command S, and I'll catch you next time.